Presented for your entertainment. Consider, if you will, a small community. A community not unlike the medieval cities of ancient Europe. But something is different. Our protagonist discovers, much to his surprise, that he is changing. For the better or worse is for you to decide. In the Polyverse.
The Polyverse presents Guard Dog. We had been tracking the assassin since early dawn. He had had a head start, but we knew we were closing in. After all, moving stealthily and leaving little trace took more time than tracking by a professional who had no need to be subtle. No one kills a member of the royal family and lives. That was certain. I was the lead scout, fast and well attuned to the woods of the Pale North, and I was the one that would have the honor of quartering the expletive deleted. Tell the commander, I whispered to my apprentice. There's a cave just past the glen. The assailant cowers at our approach. The youth slipped back towards the line formed to keep the coward from escaping. It felt odd referring to another as a youth even now. Though he was a teen, I was barely a tween myself. I was a little lanky and short of stature. My muscles were average, and my dark hair was shorn so close that it wouldn't interfere with my work. My woods-colored clothes were snug, and there was less chance of them getting caught on anything and leaving a trail myself. I carefully crept to the cave, making sure I was not seen so that I could catch up the man unawares. This was the Earl's favorite hunting spot. All his guards, myself amongst the top, knew the ins and outs of this place. I knew that cavern had no other way out. I slowly and carefully entered, whereupon I was ambushed. It was a short tussle. He had desperation on his side, and I wasn't trained in close quarters combat, nor was I desperate. So he managed to overpower me. A little embarrassing, but since I was not a guard, it was almost forgivable. "Traitor to the crown!" called the guard captain to the assassin. "You are to surrender yourself to justice immediately." "I'll do no such thing!" he called, urging me forward with a knife to my throat. "You will let me go, and I will let your scout live." "It doesn't work that way, and you know it," I gagged, knowing the archers were already lining up their shots, even though we weren't even outside the cave. Our archers were, after all, that good. "Shut it! I'm not negotiating with you." "You're dead either way," the guard captain shrugged. "Let him go, and the gods may have mercy on you. The crown won't." "Then what's another murder?" The assassin plunged his dagger into my chest, perforating my lung and just missing my heart. As I collapsed to the ground, the archers loosed their arrows, and the assassin was dropped like a pincushion. The guard captain dismounted his horse and approached slowly as I felt the life dripping from my breast. "There's no medicine that can save me, sir. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused," I coughed as the guard captain came to check on me. "You did your duty, and you will be credited with his finding," he returned solemnly. "No one outside this party will know the specifics. That's all I can offer." "That's enough. It was an honor." The guard captain reached for his dagger. He would not leave one of his men suffering. As I waited for the darkness to overtake me, commotion sounded outside. "A mountain has exploded in the skies!" someone called. Then the ground shook, knocking everyone down. As the guard captain turned to issue orders, a cloud of dust approached. As it overtook us, the earth started to quake violently. With a knock to my head, all went dark. At some point, I must have woken enough to begin my move back towards the keep, because the next thing I knew, I collapsed on the road and some townsfolk rushed over to figure out what was going on and how they could help. Then, darkness again, and I woke in the keep's medical ward. "We have no reason to suspect you, Scout Carey, but you are the only one to return, and we all knew a mountain exploded in the sky in the area where you are allegedly searching for this assassin," the castle healer soothed as I returned to consciousness again. "What can you tell us?" The healer was in his almost white robe, smelling of the incense used to promote healing. His wizened face was always full of concern. My throat was dry, my mouth didn't want to work. After a few attempts, I finally managed. We found the traitor. Justice served. Then, then the sky exploded. What are the others? The princess asked aloofly, appearing in my view. She was the most beautiful woman in the land. Oh, lie. Her curly carrot hair was bouncy and full of life, even as her perfect jade eyes were filled with concern. I was stunned. Never had I seen her so close. Hers were the third-tier elite. Only the king's personal guard and special services were higher in the order. I had only just made grade 6 of the Earl's own. I shouldn't be near her. Why was she here? Why was I in the king's castle? Why couldn't I concentrate? Highness, I don't even know how I got back. She stood over me, her eyes quaked in growing worry. But why was she worried? You're our hero. My brother is avenged. With that remark, she must have remembered something important she had to do, or what I was, because she rushed out and the Keep Knight commander stepped into view. Rest. Recover your strength. We'll figure out what to do with you later. Throughout my recovery, I was left pretty much alone. After all, with no battles occurring and summer being a season of generally good health, the wards, especially in the tower, were mostly empty. While I did have a few nightmares and my stomach was nearly constantly growling with hunger, I was just assumed that my body needed more food to properly heal. It took a few more days than we expected, but I was soon better than ever. I didn't even have a scar where I was stabbed through the heart. With no evidence that it happened, though, I wasn't going to volunteer that I had almost been killed. With my whole group having been killed, I would have to be put in a nether, and I didn't want that on my resume. As I was now considered a hero to the crown, the princess had for some reason insisted I be placed in third tier to replace some of those lost during the Pyrrhic hunt to avenge her brother's death. After what I'm sure was a marathon of badgering, the king gave his blessing, so long as I passed an entrance qualification. After all, no one as young as I had ever been made a tier 3. As a normal schedule for the qual was only a week from now, I had been given leave to use the time to train, and I and everyone else knew I would need it. The training yards were, as always, a bustle of activity. Clinked, shields smacked, and men yelled. The scent of blood, sweat, and other smells I prefer not to mention permeated the air. During my stint in the recovery wards, I had lost a lot of surface layer fat, and so my muscles were showing through almost impressively, and somehow I was far stronger than I had ever been. I trained with a heavy oaken practice blade, swiping and stabbing at practice dummies to build up my arm strength, and I thought I was doing pretty good. I was an archer and normally trained on the range, and if I did train with blades, I was usually out of breath within a few minutes. But today, I was barely breaking a sweat. Oh, look, the scout thinks he's a god, one of the princess's own mocked. They were a prideful bunch. Let's show him what he's up against. There was no use trying to tell them that I really didn't want keep duty, that I would have been perfectly happy staying on the outside in service to the Earl and his hunts for the rest of my life, so I just resigned myself to getting beaten. But I would make them work for it. The group of 3 of those princesses' own surrounded me, and some of the others in the yard formed a circle around us to watch. The aggressors began to circle like buzzards, brandishing their heavy but blunted practice weapons menacingly. As I watched and waited, time seemed to slow down, much as it had when I was aiming for a long shot, but this sensation lasted far longer and was much more intense than I had ever felt it before. Even before I saw the movement, I knew which of them was about to attack me. He charged, his war cry somehow muffled even in my heightened awareness. I casually swung my practice sword to hit his chest with the broadside. I connected with his left side of his ribcage and distinctly felt and heard the cracking of bones, and he was knocked back a good distance, despite me not having swung that hard, I thought. I had never broken anyone's bones before, but I could not marvel at this as I was being rushed from the other side by another attacker. This attacker had his stick above his head, intending to swing down at my head to crack my skull open. I noticed that, even as he saw what happened to his companion, he redoubled his efforts. I blocked the blow by raising my mock claymore above my head with both hands on the hilt, dropping to my knee to deflect the energy away as I had been trained. After the blow had dissipated, I punched up with my closest hand and connected with his stomach, knocking the wind and lunch out of him. As I turned to the final of the main trio, my eyes caught the movement of the crowd. 2 more of the princess's own were rushing in to help. That distraction was enough that the last attacker managed to hit my wrist with his practice blade and knock the weapon out of my hands. He took a few more swings, but eased up as new compatriots approached, and I was able to recover from the beating and knock his own weapon out of his hands. Time snapped back to normal, and I was overcome by blows. Thankfully, they didn't hurt as much as I anticipated, and though I was beginning to bleed, I managed to block some of the blows and return a few of my own, even as the one that lost his lunch recovered enough to participate again. Soon, we were all bruised and banged up, but they finally relented first. "Wow!" I marveled as the last fell. "I'm better than I thought. Thank you for the practice. I think I need some time on the range." The archery range was on the far side of the keep, well away from the commotion at the training field. It was a relief to be in a familiar place again. I grabbed one of the bows and a quiver and made my way to the far end of the firing line. After only a few shots, Trevor, one of the keep's patrol supervisors, approached. "Boy, that week in bed appears to have made you a better shot, if that's even possible. I mean, the entire quiver and a bullseye with the furthest target. Woo!" Trevor, like me, was ahead of the game. Though we were both young, our responsibilities were impressive. "Hey, Trev, you know us archers of the North. There ain't nothing we can't hit," I shrugged, though I have to admit, even I was slightly impressed. "But look at you now. I mean, a shift patrol supervisor and everything." "Well, speaking of added responsibilities, you interested in a patrol tonight?" "Maybe. Why? I've been ordered to train, you know." "Oh, you're the one? Wondered why you were here after the Earl left," he grimaced. "But anyway, some new beast has been spotted in the alleys in the market district. We got a couple residents too, and it's too quick for our archers. Guard captain wants it disposed of before it sets its sights higher, But I see you have been trained in the yard. Maybe I shouldn't have asked." "Nah, Trev, it's good. I could use a good hunt. Meet you after dinner?" "That sounds like a date." I got a few more quivers downrange before my stomach started to growl, louder than usual, and I decided to head down to the pub for a nice filling dinner. As always, the pub was lively and the delicious aromas filled the air. Whenever I had been at the keep in the past, I had stopped here. The food was decent, and some of the scenery was occasionally witnessed, but normally I was not a fan of the place. This time, it felt warmer, more comforting, the aromas more alluring, more like I belonged here. Rather than find a table in the corner like I would have done in the past, I bellied right up to the bar. "Anything special on the menu tonight?" I asked of the barkeep as he passed. We got some nice mutton and taters," he shrugged. "And the cider tonight, it's tops." "Well, bring it up." I dropped some coin on the counter. "Looks like you've had a tough day there, Tiger," one of the barmaids remarked. She was aggressively average, her long brown hair in a ponytail. While I was not normally assertive when it came to relations, I decided, why not? "Well, things are certainly looking up," I smiled. After I had finished with my dinner and dessert, I headed to the Outer Bailey barracks where the night patrol was to depart from. "Ho! So you decided to show after all," Trevor smiled knowingly. "We got word that Rita was going to keep you company." "Well, she was finished, and I was finished, and I did say I was going to help, so here I am. Perhaps a little late, but you haven't left yet." "You arrived just in time," Trevor nodded. "You'll join me and the lead team. I'll fill you in on our way back to the beat." For the patrol tonight, we had been organized into a blade, or 5 team of 5. Each team was referred to as a dagger. I was lead Dagger Bravo, LDB, or the fifth person of the lead team. A more permanent team would have had a cool name, but that was not the case, however, for an impromptu assault team. Lead Dagger Lead was Trevor. Lead Dagger 1 was the second in command, a good keep guard named Linda. Next was Lead Dagger Alpha, who was an acquaintance of mine from the keep's guard named Phil, and Lead Dagger 2 was a young lady I'd never met named Stephanie. Apparently, she was an archer's apprentice. Turns out there may be more than one of the beasts, but no clear sighting has been made to determine what it was. Tonight, we were on a mission to catch at least one, or failing that, kill one and have it dissected by the Keep's Ministry of Alchemical Studies, or KMAS, the big brains of the kingdom. The market district, where the majority of the incidents had occurred, was a hodgepodge of buildings, shops, stalls, tents, and the residences of those who ran them. The stone and wooden structures were of no standard size or shape, so the streets were more of suggested paths. As we entered the district, the blade split up into daggers. "Weapons at the low ready. Be ready for anything," Trevor re-emphasized as he drew his long dagger. I nocked an arrow, but kept my bow down, as did Stephanie. Linda, a trained dual wielder, drew her katana and wakizashi, and Phil, the heavier of the group, drew his claymore. Remember, Stephanie, your best quick aiming will require both eyes. Yeah, you just keep yours in the distance like the pro I'm told you are. She tried to sneer, but I could tell she was considering other things. We're all professionals, Linda called out after she caught herself checking me out. Use designators, not names. All right, Lead Dagger, chatter to a minimum. Only operationally needed noise be made, Trevor sighed. Let's keep our minds on the mission. Sounds of activity in other districts and nightly activities of the market were a little muted as we carefully searched everywhere we could think of for any kind of beast of substantial size. All the while, we kept an eye out in the distance lest something sneak up on us. Lead! Called Stephanie. Movement down the alley! This was one of the paths that had many different entrances and exits. After Linda blew some notes on a signaling whistle to let others know we had found something, the team started down the alley, Stephanie keeping an eye on the distance as I watched for our retreat. Two, did you get a good look at it? One, it was the size of a big dog, quick as a black blur though, fur black as ink. Matches the descriptions earlier, Trevor returned, but be wary of civilians or other daggers. We all acknowledged as we continued down the dark alley. As we looked over every square inch, we heard others whistling signals either this thing was very fast or there was definitely more than one. Phil got body slammed as he passed a cross alley, his claymore taking a big chunk out of the beast's hide. Its howls sent shivers through all of our spines. After it lashed back a few times and brutal blows were exchanged, it bounded off. Stephanie launched an arrow grazing it, and I launched one sticking true to his flanks. That was like a bear! Phil coughed up some blood as he clutched his mangled arm. More like a mad alchemist merged a bear's body with the head of a fox, I heard Stephanie return as I darted down the alley to follow the beast. I heard Linda signal what had happened to the rest of the blade, and Trevor called for me to come back, but I was too focused. I had prey in my sights. Despite the pitch darkness, my eyes made out detail I would never have noticed even on a bright day. I could smell the animal's blood, and it was energizing. Although it was quiet, I could make out as much sound as if it were a busy and crowded day. My ears focused on the sounds of my prey. I nocked and released arrows as fast as lightning, and even though I was running faster than ever before, I hit my target several times. Again, I noticed time slowing, but it didn't help me catch the beast. Each wound I caused more scent to emanate, energizing me more. My hyper-focus turned out to have a downside. I was blindsided by another, bigger beast, with claws of a tiger and the bulk of a steer. I lost my quiver and bow. All I had was the emergency dagger in my belt. We grappled and broke off several times, each of us in turn running, charging, using weapons of opportunity, and attacking again. Soon we found ourselves on the walls of the outer bailey. I knew there were other archers and guards hoping to find an opportunity to attack without risking my life, but there were no archers of the north, and few found targets. Finally, I found a coup de grace. I stabbed upwards towards the bottom of its snout, and my blade pierced its brain, killing it instantly. Unfortunately, we were on the edge of the wall, and we fell, but at least I'd killed my prey. A short time later I woke with a start as I felt a cold compress be laid upon my forehead. The sudden movement caused something of a twist in my gut, but I managed to hold my vomit until I was handed a bucket to use. After I was finished, I looked up, and to my shock, I recognized the girl sitting on the side of my bed. Hey, Stephanie? I thought you were an archer's apprentice. I am, sir. Her concern felt a bit overwhelming, but I didn't want to object. And in all my name, you were my master last night, and I had to know you weren't, Well, it takes more than a grand beast to take me down. I was uncomfortable, but oddly... Now what did I tell you? Demanded the voice of one of the apprentice healers. I think her name was Deborah. Didn't I tell you to stay away from my patient? You know nothing about healing. Stephanie stood to confront the healer's apprentice. He's my trainer, and... Hey, I don't know what this is about, but I think we can tuck it out. No one needs to get hurt. I sat up straighter in my bed. The two stared at each other for a moment before their eyes returned to me, an odd level of concern covering both their faces. Sorry, but rules are rules, and the only apprentices allowed here are healers. She looked back at Stephanie. Unless they're injured. Try it, Blondie. Let's see if you can heal your own nose. Oh, called Trevor. Both of you calm down. Apprentice Archer Bowman, you missed turnover. You need to report to remedial duty now. No buts. Now! Stephanie looked at me and smiled weakly. I'll be back. Like hell! Apprentice Healer Gwilyn, I think you need to find your superior and let him know the patient is awake. She thought long and hard about refusing, but in the end she relented, placing the breakfast healer's broth she had brought for me on the end table. After she left, Trevor looked me over and shook his head. Man, what has happened to you? Rita last night, 2 apprentices this morning? I knew we're young and studly, but... I've never felt like this before. I shook my head and grabbed my broth. I've always had a drive, but, not like this, and despite almost getting killed last night, I've never felt better. Well, maybe you're a late bloomer, and as such... Yeah, got a lot of ground to make up, sure. I slurped my broth, but it happened so sudden. That's how it gets sometimes. You don't care until it hits you, then that's all you can think about, but you kind of put me in a bind. How so? Like, the entire keep knows I asked you to help with the business last night, and a lot of them know you disobeyed my orders, and we're not exactly friends, but... Looks that bad, huh? At least your actions got a few of them. K-Mass is happily dissecting 2 previously unknown beasts, he shrugged. You got the job done, but... Rules are rules, I know. Yeah, officially I'm here to reprimand you, so, bad boy, don't do it again, he shook his finger at me. Be glad it wasn't an official posting and no one died. Oh, I've heard you'd been nearly killed, the princess's voice announced. Guardsman, he is not to be reprimanded. He saved us all, so I hear. Highness? He may not be my guard, but you will still listen to me. Understood? Good. Now leave us. Yeah. Good luck, Scout. I was shocked. My body was responding, but my mind said, No! As she sat on the bed, the head healer cleared her throat. Highness, come here to thank the Keeper's hero again, I see. For a moment, it was like she didn't hear him. Then, she shook her head and her eyes focused back to reality. Oh, healer, see to it he is, seen to. As she guiltily and quickly departed, she glared at Deborah and smiled back at me. What's going on, Doc? Sometimes people's desires to help is complicated. You know nothing had happened, right? Well, absolutely. Well then, apprentice, he turned to Gwynlyn. Take this bucket to K-Mass and have them run some tests on it. Make certain our hero is not infected or otherwise impaired. I'll see about getting a blood sample. He pulled out a knife and some bandages and set up to bleed from my arm. As Deborah fought the urge to disobey, he pulled out a vial. "This is a tonic that should help." He poured the black liquid into my broth. "You need to take it daily until I tell you otherwise." After I took the tonic, I was under less pressure. The healer mentioned something about humors, and I didn't press him on that. Thanks to my displays on the first day and the night of my training, I was not challenged by others in the training yard as I continued my own practice, and was able to train without further interruption. The compulsion I had felt for the first day was not nearly so strong, though it was starting to strengthen again. Eating helped, and so did the tonic, but finally it was the day of the qualifications tournament. I had alternated evenings with Rita and Stephanie, and I had never felt so alive as I entered the grand arena. We had already finished the preliminaries. I shot better and from a greater distance than any had in history, but I was an archer of the North. I was that good. And the previous green matches had ended with cheers erupting from the audience. I was the youngest and an underdog to boot, so it must have been that connection that they felt. I was already scored high enough to be assured a place on Tier 3, but now it was just for bragging rights. The finals was a melee. The last one standing would be the grand champion. Time had not slowed down for me this tournament, perhaps because I was just having a good day and hadn't needed the boost, but then again, I hadn't felt a rush from combat as I had the first night, and the entire rest of the time leading up to the qualifications. Whatever the reasons, I felt I didn't need the boost anyway. Now, though, the overwhelming adulation was starting the rush again. My heart started racing, and my focus narrowed. I felt the thrill of the hunt start to well up in my chest. Unlike that first day, I welcomed it, like an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. As the gong sounded, the 6 of us finalists rushed out at each other, our practiced weapons at the ready. In the back of my mind, I knew a bloodlust was wrong, but though it was tough, I restrained myself. Pulling punches and kicks and other blows so as not to break bones, I knew I was getting hit, but I also knew it wasn't slowing me down, so I ignored the blows and focused on not killing anyone else. In the end, I was the last one standing, the one that had the least chance, and I was the youngest and most inexperienced in the tournaments. I still won. I later learned that, despite reservations to the contrary, I was placed on the princess's own, only because they didn't want to trust the protection of the king to the young man, and no matter how great I was, it was still trusted that I would remain a professional and in this duty, and I was not going to let anyone down. After a night of frivolity to celebrate, I reported to the command post of the princess's own deep within the keep. I had only rare occasions in the past need to venture this far into the castle. An archer of the Earl's hunting and tracking team, I was only seldomly allowed back in these halls. Brilliant tapestries added color to the walls, draperies, decorated stained glass, and rugs along the floor helped to mute the incessant steps on stone floors. Fine chandeliers hung from high vaulted ceilings. Where the castle and even more important places in the keep were decorated similarly, this was far more gilded. It was certainly a wonder to behold, and a shame more didn't get to see it regularly. But security of the sovereign and their family was of paramount importance, and we may have to show off to other kingdoms at times, I guess. The watch commander's office was simple and Spartan, a stark contrast to the halls outside. "I expect my guards to be professional and do their jobs. Other than that, I hardly care. Normally," the guard commander announced as I walked in. Her wizened voice was loud and firm. "And normally I don't allow non-castrates into my team, especially given your recent record. But these new beasts are baffling Kmass, and you have already shown the ability to dispose of them." There was plenty of space in the room for a few teams to stand in ranks and receive their task, though currently there was only 3 of us here. "So, probation then?" I tried to joke. She wouldn't have it. "Look, ma'am, I do my job and I do it well. No harm will come to the princess while I'm on guard." "It's not what happens while you're on guard that concerns me," she harumphed. "The creatures attack at night. You will be teamed up with Corbin, one of my finest castrates, so I know nothing will happen. Your watch will begin at 6 tolls. You will only be on 3/4 rotation. 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off until further notice. Dismissed. The other man, obviously Corbin, nodded as she mentioned his name. After we were dismissed, he stepped forward and indicated that I should follow. I have heard of your skills with the bow, and apparently, if the talk of the town is anything to go by, your sword skills are impressive as well, he remarked as we exited the office. The archery is practice, I shrugged. As far as the rest, I have no idea how I blossomed so quickly. The next few days was a buzz of training, learning the ins and outs of the posting. Though I was essentially barred from turnovers, Corbin passed along any needed information. Tonight was the last night of the rotation. I walked the parapets with Corbin and we chatted while keeping an eye out to the horizon. Suddenly, an ill feeling filled my heart. "We have to get to the Highness's chambers, now!" I called off, darting to run across the roof. "That is not a good way to advance," Corbin called after as he took a less treacherous route. As I approached the windows, the princess's chambers, her scream filled the night. I smashed through the glass with an arrow and knocked and scanned the room. I couldn't see anything, including the princess, but a foul stench filled the air. As I scented the air, I knew she was under the bed. She had been injured. I was compelled to check her out, to help her, but I pushed myself to find the beast. "He's in the sitting room," the princess called from under the bed. After a moment's hesitation, I smashed through the door and sitting room, where the princess would entertain her guests. As I entered, the beast, another one of the steer-sized man-tigers, attacked. It spoke no words, but somehow communicated to me. "Ah, I knew I would find you here. One of the men that survived the impact. Only a few could turn the energy and virus to survive, especially on their own. You could join us, rule this pathetic place." "What are you waiting for?" yelled Corbin as he shot the beast. "Nothing attacks the Grand House and survives." Snapped out of my stupor, I shot arrows into the flank of the retreating form. This one was faster than the last. As I chased him, my focus narrowed again. The will of the hunt was strong, and I liked it. Perhaps too much. We ran across the rooftops of the keep. Sometime I was forced onto a different one than the end he ran across, but I did manage to keep up, barely. In order to gain some ground on him, I abandoned my bow and quiver and began to lope on all fours. Finally, I caught up with him as he jumped an impossible distance between roofs. I intercepted, and we tumbled into an alley. As we exchanged blows, time again slowed, but I felt I had more of a handle on the intensity of the shift, and as I was able to use this as an effective tool, something I had feeling he was much better at than I also began to notice my limbs taking on more of an animal form. My nails grew into claws, my fingers elongated, and the joints and other bones repositioned themselves. It should have hurt, but in my focus was on my prey, it didn't. At times the fight broke up as we dodged and grabbed weapons of opportunity, and he tried to get away. We inched towards the edge of the keep, and again I found myself on outer walls. Suddenly, a small but powerful thing struck me in the side. Seconds later, thunder clapped. I collapsed and the beast bounded off. I passed out, pain filling my body. I could smell where I was even before I opened my eyes. "This is starting to get familiar," I groaned, eyes still closed. I thought I was mistaken, but I was surrounded. Deborah was dabbing a wet rag on my forehead. Stephanie was holding my shooting hand. The princess was holding my steady hand, and Rita and Corbin were trying to be useful in the background. I opened my eyes and took a deep breath. "What's going on?" "You were comatose for all of last week," Deborah soothed. "Hey, can you bring the broth?" "The master healer had to remove that metal slug from your side that the thunder put in," Rita continued as she brought broth over in a warm bowl. "And it seems you have some kind of poison on it." The princess smiled weakly. "A poison that only affected you. We were kind of hoping that you could shed some light on that when you woke up," Stephanie soothed. "Nice, nice to see you all getting along," I struggled after some slurps of broth. This was too important to fight about, Deborah acknowledged for all.
You do realize, Corbin started, that broth is tainted with unicum. Yeah, pretty sure. People like me are quite familiar with that substance.
Impossible. He's taking doses daily for...
Deborah's jaw dropped on the floor. And despite its effects weakening, he will continue to take it until we figure out something else, the master healer announced. That way things don't get more out of hand. I'm certain you all have things that you have to attend to. Highness, your mother requests your company. It looks as if the celebration will happen tonight, and she wishes you to help with the preparations.
Slowly, reluctantly, the group departed. Once they were out of earshot, the master healer began again.
We have problems, not just the keep, but the kingdom.
I don't know what...
As even K-Mass is clueless, you are not expected to know. But you are the only one that stands a chance to help us curtail this threat, and get information to K-Mass so that they can solve the myriad of problems we now face.
He was a no-nonsense kind of healer.
This is part of the festivities tonight. The people need to know that the king sees the problem and he's doing something about it. You are to be made a team leader of a new task force headed by the keep commander himself. Drink your broth. We can't afford problems tonight. And so, a task force is formed to learn arcane secrets. But what truly can be known of the unknown?
We hope you liked this presentation of the Tales from the Polyverse Guard Dog. Please like and subscribe for more content as we continue to create stories of amazement.